Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the team selection for Game Week 10, and you can see my FPL challenge squad on screen. And this week, the challenge is called Winning Feeling, so double points will be awarded for all winning goals. You can pick one player per club and an unlimited budget as well. I picked Roofs in goal, facing Everton at home, Gabriel away to Burnley, the informed Brian Mbeumo facing Nottingham Forest away from home, and three forwards in Erling Haaland as my captain against Bournemouth at home, Jean-Philippe Mateta facing Brentford at home, and Danny Welbeck, who has 2 goals against Leeds throughout his career. He's also at home, and ultimately you want to pick these midfielders and forwards with the best chance of scoring in Game Week 10. Be sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy, and stay tuned for more live streams and videos throughout this season. There'll be a best wildcard squad for Game Week 10, potentially a predicted lineups, and also that deadline stream on Saturday, and also a reaction stream over the weekend. And for match day 4 in UCL Fantasy, there'll be best wildcard and limitless squads, my team selection, and a very eagerly anticipated deadline stream next Tuesday, which will be very hectic to say the least. Also, check out all the links in the description below, such as my Patreon and the Jumpships, fair access to my videos, amongst my other perks. My Discord server, the FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'm able to get this to over 100 likes on YouTube and to close in on 37 subscribers. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. After some real consistency in the last couple of game weeks, match day 9 was a big disappointment and quite a low scoring game week in general. The average was at around 46 points overall, and Robert Sanchez only got 1 point against Sunderland at home after conceding twice, and the Black Cats made a great comeback to win that game, and it was ultimately deserved. Chelsea have been more suspect defensively in the last couple of game weeks, even at Stamford Bridge, where they have leaked in a few goals, and their clean sheet against Nottingham Forest was a bit of a red herring because I did point it out at the time. Chelsea scored 3 goals, they had some good attacking play and did very well from set pieces, but defensively they considered some big chances and the warning signs were there. And when I was asked about buying Robert Sanchez this week, going into that Sunderland fixture, my advice was to not go for that sort of move because ultimately you want to make your transfers in the outfield positions, and with a goalkeeper, the ceiling won't be that high, and with Chelsea, they can't be relied upon defensively. I do like Reece James as a punt until Game Week 13, but he's always an injury-prone player, and I don't mind going for that sort of punt, but with Robert Sanchez, it made no sense to me, and the best goalkeeper in FPL right now is David Raya when you consider the fixtures, Arsenal's clean sheet potential, and also the reliability of that Gunners defence. But Roofs has been the highest scoring goalkeeper in FPL up until this point. He started the season at 4.5 million. He's another decent option, but Sunderland have some poor fixtures on the horizon, and the other choice would be Nick Pope, with Newcastle looking solid defensively in most matches. But in my defensive line, I bought Dan Burn to replace Konsa, who kept a clean sheet and delivered DEFCON against Manchester City for the first time this season, by the way. So selling Konsa was a bit frustrating, but ultimately he would have been on my bench. It did prevent Lacroix entering my starting 11 though. He got 4 points against Arsenal because of DEFCON, and Dan Burn blanked and played very poorly against Fulham in a 2-1 victory for Newcastle. But 2 players carried my team this week in Pedro Porro, who got 11 points against Everton, courtesy of an assist. Also 2 bonus points. He wasn't too far off from DEFCON, but ultimately Van der Ven stole the show with 23 points in general. He hit DEFCON, scored a brace, and also got the clean sheet and maximum bonus points. So those of Van der Ven would have had a terrific boost at the very end of the game week. And Gabriel is Mr. Reliable. A lot of questions were asked in the deadline stream. Should we sell him or bench him because of the yellow flag? My advice was always to start him, and if he had enough decent defensive coverage, then it should be fine. And of course, some people were frustrated because they would have had Rodon on the bench, and most people have Gabriel. So if that substitution was made and Gabriel didn't feature against Crystal Palace, they would have made even bigger strides in terms of the rankings, with effective ownership being such a pivotal part of FPL. But that's another clean sheet for Arsenal. Maximum bonus points for Gabriel, which he shared with Eze. And I think Arsenal are looking so solid defensively that a double up is almost the minimum. And in some cases, you could triple up on the Gunners defensively. But I still like having that attacking spot available for one of Saka, Gyökeres, or even Declan Rice, who cost 6.6 million and is right up there amongst the highest scoring midfielders in the game. Speaking of which, I've got a few of them in my FPL setup. But Antoine Semenyo has been disappointing in the last couple of game weeks. He blanked against Nottingham Forest and only got the clean sheet point, and also against Crystal Palace in a 3-3 thriller. He only got an assist and was booked in that game. So that's 7 points out of the last 2 game weeks, and the next 2 fixtures aren't great for Bournemouth on paper, facing Man City and Aston Villa away. And Ndiaye was brilliant against Tottenham with his overall performance, but he actually played a part in the Everton goal being disallowed because he was obstructing Vicario, and based on the rules, you have to say that was the correct decision. But Ndiaye played so well. He's always taking on the opposing fullback, creating chances and making things happen. He has that X factor in the Everton attack, but the Toffees heavily rely on their wingers in Grealish and Ndiaye to create chances. Their fullbacks simply aren't good enough going forwards, and there is an imbalance in that team, and Beto simply isn't good enough up front to lead the line. Dewsbury Hall has moments of quality, but if there's one Everton attacker or player you want in your FPL team, it would be Ndiaye. He can get DEFCON goals, he's on penalties, and I think the assists will come once his teammates can convert some of the chances he creates. And Cody Gakpo blanked against Brentford. He played 60 minutes as Liverpool lost yet again 3-2 at the hands of Brentford on Saturday night. That's 4 consecutive defeats in the Premier League. That's the first time we've ever seen a team win their first 5 games and then go on to lose the next 4. And Bruno Fernandes blanked. You could say he got DEFCON, fair enough, but to only get 4 points when United scored 4 goals is really disappointing to say the least. And Bryan Mbeumo has been the standout Man United asset over the last 3 game weeks. He got an assist a couple of weeks ago, then he followed that up with a big goal against Liverpool, and then after that, a brace against Brighton and 15 points overall. So Bryan Mbeumo has been very consistent over the last couple of game weeks, and he is probably the go-to Man United attacker from now up until the second half of this season. But the front 3 was quite underwhelming, to be honest. In fact, all of them blanked, and I still think all of them have a case of being on the wild card, particularly in the case of Haaland and Voltemada. But Joao Pedro's blanked in 5 consecutive games. He's not getting shots off, let alone scoring goals. And Nick Voltemada has some credit in the bank because I bought him a couple of weeks ago. He scored in 2 out of the 3 matches I've had him in, so I'm not going to pull the trigger anytime soon, and I don't think he's a sell. I think in a lot of cases he's a hold, especially against West Ham away. But in terms of purchasing a striker this week, I think Mateta would be one of the standouts. And Erling Haaland blanked against Aston Villa. He missed a big chance saved by Emi Martinez. He was the default captain, and ultimately, in weeks like this, you can challenge Haaland for the captaincy, but you can see throughout my entire starting 11, only 2 players got significant returns, and both of them are defenders, and I wouldn't have thought about captaining Gabriel against Crystal Palace this week. So I think with most of the template midfielders and forwards, they let us down this week, and it's very difficult to find that consistent performer with a high ceiling who can really rival Erling Haaland for the captaincy. It would be great to see the likes of Cole Palmer return very soon, and that will probably happen in November, and seeing him be a consistent performer in Fantasy Premier League, especially like he was a few years ago under Maurizio Pochettino. I think Bukayo Saka showed some promise in recent games, but I think that was quite an underwhelming performance against Crystal Palace. He was subbed off early. It was the correct decision by Mikel Arteta, and it looked like he was ill throughout the week, and he was a bit of a doubt to face Crystal Palace, but he still made that extra push and started the game. But I think with Saka and all these Arsenal attackers, more needs to be done in terms of creating opportunities and scoring goals, because Arsenal are relying on set pieces at this moment in time. And then you look at Salah. He scored against Brentford, but only 6 points. He's had a very poor start to the season, especially for his high standards. 3 goals and 2 assists in the Premier League simply isn't good enough. So only Erling Haaland has been doing the business amongst premiums so far this season. And on my bench, I had the likes of Dubravka, who got 2 points against Wolves in a very important win there for Burnley. They got that last-ditch winner through Lyle Foster, and they're looking very solid right now, but there are some tough fixtures on the rising, like Arsenal up next. Reinders got 1 point against Aston Villa. He played as the lone 6, and once I saw that, I was quite confident that benching him was the correct decision. Lacroix got 4 points from DEFCON. He actually made over 20 defensive contributions, which was outstanding. He definitely has that capability, but if I were picking a Crystal Palace defender, it would be Daniel Munoz. He's the most exciting Eagles asset overall, but if you just want to find the best value, I think Chris Richards offers the best at 4.5 million, and that can really help you make upgrades in other positions. And my other player was Renildo Mandava, who got 2 points against Chelsea, and that's his first game since that suspension he picked up a couple of weeks ago, the red card against Aston Villa, and he could be very useful, particularly on a bench boost in Game Week 10 facing Everton at home. So in terms of my rank and also the points, it's not particularly great, but Bodro helped me out a little bit, but even then, Van de Ven scoring a brace was also quite costly, so I actually got a red arrow of around 200,000 places. I was on a green after all the Saturday matches had completed, and yet all my players had blanked by that stage, but I just didn't get enough returns this week to secure that green arrow. So only 42 points, a massive downgrade from the previous game weeks where I got 82 and 75 in back-to-back match days. But it's still a decent platform. I'm not in a rush to wildcard, and even if I'd played that chip in Gameweek 9, I don't think I would have gained too many more points compared to what I got in the end for Gameweek 9, and I would have lost out on certain players like Pedro Porro, who delivered 11 points overall. So I've actually got 0.1 million in the bank, and my squad value is approximately 101.4 million. There were some price falls over the last couple of days, which I'll address in the next section, and unsurprisingly, Reinders was one of them. He now costs 5.6 million again. His price has been very turbulent this season. He goes up and down very quickly, and I'd think with Reinders, he is ultimately a sell, which I discussed a couple of weeks ago in a Transfer Tips podcast. But Lacroix was the recent price faller overnight. He went down to 5 million. Robert Sanchez remains at 4.9 after a price fall over the last couple of weeks, and Dubravka somehow is still 4 million. He's one of the highest scoring goalkeepers in the game, and you could argue that it's just worth having Dubravka and just cheaping out your goalkeepers and then investing all your money in the outfield players. But I still think having a Raya or Pope being that reliable option as your main keeper would be the best way to go about it. But there's no need to go for a more expensive backup goalkeeper than Martin Dubravka at this moment in time. Pedro Porro is still 5.6, but with Spurs' upcoming fixtures, and I do expect a downturn in form, I think Porro could also decrease in price fairly soon. And Dan Burn is 5.1 million. He could be quite useful in fixtures like West Ham away coming up next, but it was a very poor start against Fulham at home as my new signing. And Gabriel Magalhaes is 6.4 million. He's the best defender in FPL, and the closest rival is probably Jurrien Timber, and I think doubling up on the Arsenal defence is an absolute priority. Bruno Fernandes is 8.9 million. He has been very frustrating so far this season. And Cody Gakpo is 7.6. I believe he went up just before the deadline. And Semenyo is 8.1 million, despite a few blanks in the last couple of game weeks. And Ndai remains at 6.5 million in Fantasy Premier League. He has been very underrated, but there are some decent fixtures for Everton from an attacking perspective. Nick Voltemada is 7.4 million. Erling Haaland, unsurprisingly, is 14.7, and Joao Pedro is 7.5 million. His ownership is below 60% now, and he has been a very poor FPL asset for quite some time now. The other players on my bench include Renildo Mandava, who is still 4 million. The others were covered earlier in this segment. But let's discuss some possible transfers to bolster my Gameweek 10 team, and also in terms of the bench boost, which is a real possibility for me this week. So selling Pedro Porro to Jurrien Timber would be one of the standout transfers, but it does require a downgrade elsewhere. I would be a few million short, as Timber costs 6 million right now in FPL. And to make that happen, I could sell Cody Gakpo to Ismaila Sarr, which I've discussed for quite some time now. I still wouldn't rule out buying Enzo Fernandez, who has a great record against Tottenham. He performed very well away from home last season against this opposition. So buying one of Enzo Fernandez or Sarr would do the trick in terms of giving me enough funds to buy Jurrien Timber for Pedro Porro, which long-term is a massive upgrade. There could be rotation for Arsenal over the coming weeks, and ultimately, with my final transfer plans, I'll see how all these teams line up in the Carabao Cup, but I would expect Arsenal to rotate and give the likes of Timber and Gabriel a rest, and if that's the case, they should be ready to go against Burnley, and I don't think the Gunners will undermine or underestimate Burnley because they've been very solid so far this season. But the alternative transfer would be something like Bruno Fernandes to one of Saka or Bryan Mbeumo, and whilst United have been very solid recently, they've got 3 consecutive wins in the Premier League, I still think it's premature to double or triple up on the Red Devils, and going from Bruno Fernandes to Bryan Mbeumo does seem a bit sideways. For those buying in fresh, I think Mbeumo is the clear standout. He'll score the most goals, particularly from open play, but Fernandes can still get DEFCON. He's on penalties and provides that creative spark that United really need in the midfield. And of course, against Liverpool, he got 8 points and got maximum bonus at the end with that winning assist for Harry Maguire. But I think Bukayo Saka could be quite underrated, and after a poor performance against Crystal Palace for his standards, and also being quite underwhelming against Atletico Madrid, where Arsenal won 4-0, people might be put off Saka, but this could be a great chance to even buy him and potentially captain against Burnley away. He did really well a few years ago at Turf Moor, as Arsenal won by 5-0, I believe. They smacked a lot of teams during that spell, and they could also go on that sort of run. They've got gears to reach, in my opinion, and I think more chances could be created from open play. And Burnley will likely sit back and try to contain Arsenal with a low block, but they should still get the job done, and the Gunners have so many avenues and weapons to exploit the opposition, and I think the set pieces has been crucial for them so far this season. But another transfer I'm considering is Pedro Porro to Daniel Munoz, and I think this would be a great upgrade as well. What puts me off is the fact I've already got Lacroix in my setup, and doubling up on that Palace defence doesn't seem viable. As much as I rate them defensively, they were excellent from that perspective against Arsenal and contained them in large parts of that game. But I think with Munoz, as exciting as he is to own, and I think he's a better asset than Pedro Porro over the next 5 game weeks, I don't think it's worth buying him on top of Lacroix. If I didn't have that Crystal Palace defender in my setup already, I'd be quite keen on making this transfer, but doubling up on that Arsenal defence seems more likely, and if not, I can just buy Ismaila Sarr for Cody Gakpo and replace Bruno Fernandes for Saka. I've got exactly enough money to do that, and I'll show you how that would look like using the website FPL.team later on in this video. But right now, this is my provisional team selection for Game Week 10, with 2 of the transfers I just discussed taking part to optimize my bench boost for the upcoming deadline. Robert Sanchez in goal is facing Tottenham away. That isn't particularly great. My alternative is Dubravka facing Arsenal at home. So from a bench boost perspective, my goalkeepers look quite weak, and this is probably the worst set of fixtures they both have combined compared to Game Week 9 that just went by, 11 and beyond. So that doesn't look too great, but my outfield players all look solid in terms of the fixtures, and they've got a great chance of returning points. That includes a back three of Lacroix facing Brentford at home, Timber and Gabriel if I were to buy the Dutchman in, but once again it depends on the Arsenal lineup against Brighton on Wednesday. I'll be going to the game and then seeing how Arsenal play and which players will feature, but I would expect the likes of Hincapié to get a start. He looked very solid in his brief cameo against Crystal Palace, but I think Arsenal have to be doubled or tripled up on defensively. There will be a downturn in clean sheet output. They might concede some low XG chances and some wonder goals. That has happened before, but I still think over the course of the season, Arsenal keep by far the most clean sheets in the Premier League, and even in the Champions League. I've talked about doubling up on their defence. I've done that myself and really benefited from that sort of structure. And in FPL, it's about time I also get on this train. I've had Gabriel since Game Week 2 or 3, but ultimately I'm not getting big returns because he's so template, and a lot of people have a double up in the Arsenal defence. Facing Burnley away, the Gunners are top of the clean sheet odds, which you'll see towards the end of this video, and Crystal Palace are always quite solid. They are winless in 4 matches across all competitions at the time of this recording. They've got Liverpool next in midweek, and then it's Brentford, so a lot of games coming up, and rotation needs to happen for Oliver Glasner's side, but they really go strong in every single competition. Now in my midfield, I've got a midfield 4, so that includes Bruno Fernandes facing Nottingham Forest away. Now I'm still quite keen on buying Saka, but like I said before, it would be very tight in terms of the funds. I would have exactly enough money to buy Saka for Fernandes, keep Pedro Porro and not buy Timber, and also get Ismaila Sarr for Cody Gakpo. So if I wanted to make those transfers, it probably has to be done very quickly, and I might not have the benefit of seeing how all the Carabao Cup games take place in midweek and having all that information, which is so important at times. But Sarr facing Brentford is still a decent option. He only has 1 assist throughout his career against the Bees, and Jean-Philippe Mateta has never scored or assisted against Brentford. That could obviously change this weekend with the bulk of chances he gets, and against Bournemouth, he had incredible underlying numbers. He could have scored even more goals than he did, but of course that hat-trick turned everyone's attention, and he will be the flavour of the week going into Game Week 10. Antoine Semenyo is facing Man City away. I still think is a decent option, and Bournemouth could get some joy from an attacking perspective. And Ndiaye is facing a resolute and also, I have to say, a very decent Sunderland side who are surpassing all expectations, and they're very competitive in this campaign, and you would back them to get the victory against Everton as things stand, but the Premier League is completely unpredictable. It's very congested in the Premier League table overall, and you're going to get a lot of surprising results, and it'll be very difficult to predict from now up until the end of the campaign. But the last 3 players in my starting 11 include Joao Pedro, who has been an absolute disaster recently, and Enzo Maresca pointed towards him not being fully fit, and he's playing through an injury essentially. He is up against Tottenham away next, and I do think Dr. Tottenham is still a thing despite their improvements under Thomas Frank. But at home, Spurs are 17th in the Premier League table, which is a massive kind of contradiction and also a sort of Jekyll and Hyde situation, because on their travels they are top of the Premier League table and unbeaten so far this season. But I think Chelsea could score a few goals at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium once again, and Erling Haaland, as good as he is facing a very decent Bournemouth side who are second in the Premier League table. So with the captaincy, you can go against him. I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But Nick Woltemade against West Ham isn't too shabby. But it's fair to say that Newcastle have been more consistent at St James's Park, and on their travels, they're still quite inconsistent and they're not really finding enough goals and creativity on their travels. On my bench, which will be very important this week, I am planning to activate the bench boost, which would include Dubravka at home to Arsenal, Rangers against Bournemouth at home, and you would hope for him to play a more offensive role and not be the lone DM as we saw against Aston Villa, Dan Burn away to West Ham, and Reinildo Mandava up against Everton at home. It's not the best bench boost you'll ever see, but we should temper our expectations with this chip. It generally isn't the strongest booster anyway, and in a single game week, I think if you get more than 10 points, you'll be happy with that return. If I get 15 plus, I think that would be a great sort of success rate with the bench boost in a single game week. And with the second half of the season, there'll be plenty of doubles and blanks, so I think that'll be a very template sort of order of when to use every single booster. I have made a chip strategy guide where I dissect the best time to use every single chip, the free hit, bench boost, triple captain, and wildcard for the first half of the season and the second, and there's a lot more variety for the first half of the campaign, and Game Week 10 could be very appealing for those that haven't bench boosted just yet. And for some people, of course, Game Week 9 had maybe 30, 40, 50 points on their bench. Maybe some people had 20. That would still be a great return, but that's not going to be the case for everybody. You saw my bench, of course, in the Game Week 9 review. It wasn't particularly great, and I'm happy I held out a little bit longer with the bench boost chip. But with my captain, Erling Haaland will likely take the armband, and Gabriel is my vice. Yes, you've heard correctly. There is a small chance of rotation in the Arsenal team, and Gabriel could be one of them. If he starts against Brighton, I would be slightly concerned about him getting the nod against Burnley, but I don't think that'll be the case, and I think Arsenal will go stronger in the Premier League. That is their main objective, and of course the Champions League will be another one. And with the Carabao Cup, Arsenal tend to rotate, and their squad depth is insane. They can still go very strong against Brighton with their so-called B team and get the job done on Wednesday night. But Erling Haaland, despite facing Bournemouth at home, is still the standout captain amongst my 15-man squad. If I were to buy in Bukayo Saka, which is still a possibility, I would consider captaining him over Haaland, but that's mainly because of the fixture on paper and kind of backing Arsenal to go up another gear and show what they can do from open play. But before I show you FPL.team and the Saka route, let me discuss some expected points according to the website Fantasy Football Hub. And Robert Sanchez isn't favoured over Dubravka. In fact, he has 3.2 expected points compared to Dubravka's 3.3, but ultimately both of them are quite low. Lacroix has 4.7, which is quite decent for a defender, and Timber has 5.2, and Gabriel is the second highest at 5.9. So Fantasy Football Hub also recommend vice-captaining Gabriel in my starting 11. Bruno Fernandes has 5.8, Ismail Assar produces 5.1 expected points, and ultimately Cody Gakpo is very similar. I think he has 5.2 at this moment in time. Semenyo has 5.1, and Ndai produces 4.8 expected points. Joao Pedro is quite low at 4.4 after some poor performances recently. Erling Haaland is the highest as always with 8.1, and Nick Voltemada produces 4.7 predicted points. Reinders has 4 on my bench, Dan Burn has 3.7, and Reinildo has 4.3. So if you add up those totals on my bench, that would equate to around 15 expected points. If I could get that in terms of actual points, I'd be very happy with that outcome on the bench boost. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been asked many questions about when to bench boost and use certain chips, but I think the best thing to do for those that haven't bench boosted yet is use a website like FPL.team, visualize future game weeks, see how the fixtures land for your players, and then you can see which one looks better for the bench boost. And in my case, I think Game Week 10 is the best time to use it. This is not absolutely locked in. There is still a chance I don't activate the bench boost, but as things stand, it is the most likely course of action. And Robert Sanchez, of course, in goal, Dubravka on the bench, it doesn't really matter essentially. Both of them I would expect to blank, but with the outfield players, I'm fairly confident in their ability to produce points in Game Week 10, despite some frustrating performers and also inconsistencies from the likes of Joao Pedro, Reinders, and a few others in my setup. But by buying Saka for Bruno Fernandes, I could still get Sarr for Cody Gakpo to fund the other move. But as you can see, I've got nothing left over in the bank. With Jurrien Timber and buying in for Pedro Porro instead, keeping Bruno Fernandes, I would have 0.5 million left in the bank. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Which route do you prefer? The expected points is 68.3 with the Saka route, but if I were to bring in Bruno Fernandes, or keep him in this case, and then sell Porro to Jurrien Timber, the expected points would be even higher at 68.8. Not a massive difference in general, but that is what FPL.team suggest. They prefer the Jurrien Timber route, but I want to see what you think down in the comment section below. And ultimately, if I wanted to go for Saka, it would have to be done over the coming days. Because I bought Bruno Fernandes at 9 million instead, I wouldn't have 0.6 million in the bank, but instead I would have 0.5 as I discussed earlier. and it would use both of my 2 free transfers. I did roll a couple of weeks ago. I used one move, of course, in Gameweek 9 to buy Dan Burn for Ezri Konsa, which I still back, by the way, in the long term. But of course, Konsa got DEFCON for the first time this season on top of an impressive clean sheet against Manchester City. But I'm still quite happy with my setup overall. I don't feel like I need to wildcard just yet, but that is a possibility by Gameweek 12 or 13, and everyone gets 5 free transfers in Gameweek 16 because of AFCON as well, and that would leave the free hit in this setup. When would I use that chip? I think Gameweek 11 is the most likely, but it's not locked in or set in stone. That could still be used later in the campaign, and I think that is the most team-dependent booster of them all, because for some people, you might not have so many clashes, or you have great fixtures on paper in a game week like Matchday 11, for example, so you might want to save it for a little bit later in the season, but it will be different for everybody watching. I think with the free hit, you ultimately have to follow your own path, but I'm looking at that specific game week at this moment in time, so potentially over the next 4 game weeks, I will have used all of my boosters for the first half of the season. Stay tuned for the best wildcard team if you want to see the top 10 captains, but in this last segment of the team selection, I want to highlight the clean sheet odds. Arsenal are top with a 54% probability of keeping a clean sheet against Burnley away. Fulham are second, facing Wolves at home. Man City are also at home, of course, facing Bournemouth. They've got a 40% chance, according to the website fantasyfootballpundit.com. Newcastle are fourth, despite facing West Ham away. Liverpool are fifth, and they've really struggled defensively so far this season, but they've got a 38% chance against an in-form Aston Villa side. And Brighton are sixth with a plum fixture against Leeds on paper, but Brighton are very inconsistent and they can do even better against the biggest and best teams in the country, but against the teams they're expected to beat, they can be left wanting on several occasions. And in last spot, we've got Burnley facing Arsenal at home with a 12% probability of keeping a clean sheet at Turf Moor over the weekend. And let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. You will see these clean sheet odds in this deadline stream on Saturday. The same goes to the top 10 captains, more team news, injury updates, and all the graphics you need so you're well prepared for Game Week 10 and the rest of the season. The same goes for UCL Fantasy if you watch my Matchday 4 content in over a week's time. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. And next up will be the best wildcard squad for Game Week 10. Our aim is to get this to over 100 likes on YouTube and to close in on 37 subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, prior to comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon for the next deadline stream on Saturday, and keep your eyes peeled for UCL Fantasy content over the next couple of days.